Video number 5. And video number 5 is yet another book. And this book is called, I have it right here. I have my original copy that I found. And part of the reason that this book is so influential is just because of the way I found it. Now, I've tried to make this video 2 or 3 times, and I got all caught up because it's kind of difficult for me to talk about this book. But this book is called For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway. And if you look really closely there, I actually wrote a little note in the book for whoever might find it maybe after I'm gone. That how I found the book, because the story of how I found it really just meant so much to me, and it definitely shaped the way I saw Ernest Hemingway, because For Whom the Bell Tolls was written by Ernest Hemingway. I'm not sure which. He wrote a couple of books. He wrote a number of books, really, but I'm not sure which one this was. I don't know. I know it wasn't his first one, and I know it wasn't his last one, but for me, it's definitely his best one. And part of the reason this book is so influential for me is because of, again, how I said how I found it. And so I'll try to get to how I found it first. Now, how I found the book is interesting because I was over a friend's house, and he lived in like a 3-family apartment. Okay, there's most people around here they don't have their own homes. They live in 3-family apartments. Someone occupies the first floor, the second floor, the third floor, the attic, so on and so forth. And oftentimes in the basements of these apartments, you'll go in there and there's just so much stuff that has been abandoned by all previous tenants of the property. And a lot of the time, this stuff is, it's abandoned. Nobody's coming back for it. In fact, if you look at that picture of Marilyn Monroe, I also found that in a basement much the same. But obviously, that wasn't nearly as cool. It was just a picture. This was a whole book. And I remember I was quite young when I found it. I really think I was about 17 or 18. And I remember I picked it up, and at that point, I was not aware whatsoever of Ernest Hemingway's Legend. I had recognized the name, I remember, and I must have, recognized it from school. And I said, "Oh, Ernest Hemingway! Like this is like, some really big." Now I know the whole story. I'm older, and I've read much more into the whole myth and the legend and everything. But and I've since gone on to read many of his other books. But back then, I really had no idea about anything. So I just was like, well, Ernest Hemingway, I feel like I recognize this name. This is probably a good book. I might as well take it. I mean, it's just sitting here under all this crap. You know what I'm saying? Like we found it like underneath a furnace or something. So I grabbed it, and I went home and read it, and I was just blown away. And one of the reasons I was blown away is because this book was very real. And up until that point, I hadn't really read. It was not only real, but it took place within a war, and it was a very old war. It was the Spanish Civil War, which took place kind of around the same period as, like, I think, I'm not totally sure the dates. Don't crucify me, but it was like around, Hemingway existed around the World War I, World War II period, so this was really old. And it was really weird for me. And the other thing I loved about it was that it was an American, a Midwestern American, stationed in Spain. And the book was just very simple. There was no wizardry, there was no magic, there was nothing like that. And it was just really romantic for me in some way. And it really, I mean, I read through it. I remember I read through it down by the beach, and I was just blown away. It was like 4 mornings in a row or something. I went down to the beach and read it a little bit. And I just said, what is this book? And to this day, Hemingway, you have to understand this video, it's so hard for me to discuss him. But then after I read the book, the reason it was so influential and stuck with me, and I remembered reading that book so much, was because then afterwards I went home and read into the legend of Hemingway, and come to find out that, he was like the biggest dog there ever was in the literary scene. And I couldn't believe it because, you see, a lot of the times we approach a work of art already knowing the legend. Like when we look at the Mona Lisa, we're not just looking at it as the Mona Lisa. We're looking at it as, oh my God, this is Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece. Everybody in the whole world talks about it. It's in the Louvre. Everybody loves this. It's legendary. So I love it. You almost, you can't not love it in a way when something has reached the level that the Mona Lisa has reached. But with this book, it had reached a level, and but I was not really aware of the real level it had reached. I just read it, to read a book that I had found. that I had some slight familiarity with the author's name, but not much more than that. And I liked it without all the cake. You know what I'm trying to say? I just read it not realizing all the other ingredients that were swirling around it. I had no idea about Hemingway's legend at the time, and really did just like it for the book standing alone. Nothing else really mattered at that point. I was just like, oh, this is a goddamn good book as a book. It didn't matter whose name was on the cover. You understand what I'm trying to say? And I thought that was really big, because then when I went back home, and then it turned out that, he was the biggest dog in the literary ocean, and that he had influenced countless artists who came after him. I mean, many other artists who are on this influence series list, Hemingway goes hand in hand with them. For instance, I come across Jack Kerouac on this influence series list, and obviously Kerouac was influenced by Hemingway. I mean, basically any American writer was influenced by him. Dylan, certainly as a songwriter, was influenced by him. Metallica wrote a song called For Whom the Bell Tolls, named after this book. So when I got back and I started doing some research on it, and I saw, oh my God, Metallica, released a song, For Whom the Bell Tolls. This book is legendary. What the hell did I even pick up here? Because again, it was totally by accident. It was not a planned purchase. It really was, like Ernest Hemingway came flying into my world and forced himself in, and I thought that was so cool. And to this day, I really still feel that way. And then on top of it, the other thing that was so awesome for me was the fact that the book was set in Spain. And it really was one of the first times I ever picked up a piece of art that was solely set in new, not new, but somewhat modern Europe. And Europe for me is really hugely influential. I mean, I can't even all of Europe, if it's Belfast or Dublin or Barcelona or Madrid or Florence or Venice or Bologna or Milan and Rome, of course, all of it is so, London, Manchester, so many cities that I've never seen, Berlin, Munich, that for me, for an American, those cities are just like, oh my God, the age of the places is massive to me, and it was really just a different way. It was the first time I'd ever read something that was like in Europe. Really, it was ridiculous that somewhat modern Europe, as ridiculous as that sounds. And what I find funny about Hemingway is that he's the most quintessential American author, but so few of his stories are set in America. It's unlike Faulkner, and Faulkner often is cited, or Steinbeck, who is often cited in the same list as Hemingway. These two. Steinbeck stories are obviously kind of like all in the Dust Bowl, Great Depression, American era, which is a la Woody Guthrie, very much with a Bob Dylan vibe to them. Those stories reek of Bob Dylan. Every Steinbeck story, and then Faulkner is kind of like that gothic, weird, scary South, and then Hemingway, and then of course we have Fitzgerald, who also goes in with Hemingway, and I could get into a whole discussion about this, but Fitzgerald is the ritzy, rich, superpower Leonardo DiCaprio. That's why he did the movie, sort of America, which is Manhattan, New York, the rich people, all that. But Hemingway takes us out and brings us to the soldier in the overseas battles in a place where he really doesn't want to be. The characters are so simple, oftentimes very poor. So that was why I connected with that book in such a huge way, because I just remember sitting there reading it, and it was just this wonderful vision of simple life. It's really one of Hemingway's longest books. If you look at his other books, they're not nearly as long. And it really is a masterpiece. It's not a book that you can just sit down and read on any day. In fact, Hemingway's never like that. His books are always a mission, in a way. Because, they're kind of old. And they're just really... they're incredible. He really was one of the greatest authors. And, sometimes I find a person and I say, they're overrated. He really wasn't overrated. When you look into his work, something's there, something really primal, something really human, something that I really feel everyone can connect with. And he did have the most beautiful aspect of the American culture to me has always been, and I feel like he exemplified this, and Dylan does this very much too. Even actually rappers do this. Hemingway's big idea and philosophy on writing was that he didn't want to use enormous words. Okay, he tried to simplify the art of writing because he felt, who is going to read this work if it's not simplified? Um, the majority of people, obviously, especially back then, were almost bordering on illiterate. So he tried to reach everybody instead of just a few people who were intellectually stimulated or something. He really was the everyman. And if you look at the culture he ran around with, he almost really didn't fit in with a lot of those people. I mean, obviously, he was a very masculine sort of figure, and that's just different when it comes to the world of writing, so, or the arts in general. So I thought that was really awesome and cool, and it just, again, much like The Godfather, just connected me with this really old world that, for better or worse, I did fall in love with in many ways. And his writing is always so romantic to me. I feel like it's so in touch with, it's just so in tune with nature, with simple values of living, just a simple philosophy on life. And I love it. I really love it. So that's one of the best things to me. That's number 5, For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway. I hope you've enjoyed.